Okay, today I'm joined by Dr. Paula Owen, founder and chief fun officer of Eco Action Games, which is the UK's first eco-educational accredited B Corp. She also runs Green Gumption, a sustainability agency. Paula's PhD is in climate science. She recently won the Creative Women Platform Excellence Award in Sustainability, and she also has a sideline in writing historical fiction. So I think you're the first polymath we've had on the pod so far, but welcome, Paula.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So, that's quite a CV already, but when did you first get involved in sustainability?
I think in sustainability proper, in the kind of the wider use of the term, must have been so my background is climate science. And so I started off looking at trying to educate people about climate change. But this was back in the mid 90s,
Hmm.
and it wasn't really known as as a worry and as a concept in the wider population then. So my first professional roles after kind of academia were around educating people about climate change. So that wasn't really sustainability. I think my first venture into the complex world of sustainable development was when I joined Forum for the Future back in the late 90s when they just formed it.
Hmm.
Jonathan Orrit and Sarah Parkin had just formed it. So that was where I realized the even more complexity of sustainability rather than just kind of environmental concerns. So yes, that's where my journey started.
So, what was your role at Forum for the Future?
So it was to create a database. At the time, you have to think that the internet a wasn't an information and knowledge powerhouse back then. And so it was to create a database of sustainability in practice, examples of sustainability in practice, because of course at the time sustainable development, sustainability was quite a new term as well. And we were creating that on a CD-ROM, would you believe? Because the internet at the time couldn't hold and deliver a database and search engine on such issues. So yes, that's what we were um, challenged to do back in the day.
So when I first met you, I remember you producing this deck of playing cards in order to provoke conversation, the very ones to provoke conversations about sustainability. So where from, you've got your climate science background, and then obviously there's an educational role, and then compiling case studies from the future. How did you get to this idea of gamification? Because at that point, I hadn't really, I don't think I'd come across gamification for sustainability at all.
It didn't exist, I
Hmm.
think, at that time. I became interested. So I moved from Forum for the Future to the Energy Saving Trust. So my focus turned to energy saving, renewable energy, and latterly carbon emissions, carbon savings. And we created, so I was seconded into DEFRA at the time. This was before DEC, Department of Energy and Climate Change, was created. I was seconded into government to create the UK's first carbon calculator for the domestic sector. It
Hmm.
was part of this, you may remember it, Act on CO2
Yes,
campaign.
yes.
It was a broad government campaign to try to educate people about climate change and carbon emissions and carbon footprinting. This is in the kind of the early days of
Hmm.
all of that when people didn't understand what it was, why carbon dioxide was a problem. It was just something you put into drinks to make them fizzy. What harm could that have? So I was experimenting with different tools to try to educate, and the Act on CO2 carbon calculator was one of those tools, and it was immensely popular. It was done in a kind of a fun way. It was a cartoon kind of website, and where we led people through a series of questions, quite a few questions, to get the information we needed out of them, so then we could calculate the carbon footprint. And I was also interested in other ways of educating people, of trying to get people to change their behaviors that weren't all gloom and doom. They weren't based in guilt tripping, finger wagging, and if you don't stop doing this, that, or the other, the polar bears are going to get it.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you can guilt trip a certain percentage of the population into doing things, but not the vast majority. They just turn off from the messaging. So I was kind of looking around for other ways to get the message across. And from that is the genesis of me stumbling on the idea of taking a simple, well-known, in the UK at least, popular game, such as Top Trumps,
Hmm.
and using its game mechanic and its unexpected consequence. So I assume you play Top Trumps as
Yes.
a
Oh, absolutely.
yep. And the thing about the game, it's very simple, really. It's one number bigger than the other number, the biggest number wins. But because they're always on a theme, you accidentally get to understand more about the theme you're playing on. So for me, it was dinosaurs, Formula One cars, things like that. And in particular, Formula One cars, I wasn't at all interested in cars or Formula One. But I gained a lot of knowledge about Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and which was about kind of 0 to 60, bigger engine, that kind of thing. So it's just a simple, easy way to get people to take in information, kind of
Yeah.
accidentally. So that's where it started. And I'd left the Energy Saving Trust by then and set up my own small sustainability agency. But I just had some time on my hands, so I thought and I was well versed in calculating carbon emissions at that time. So I thought it would be a fun idea to try to create a Top Trumps type game, but using and in particular energy actions that people could do at home that would save energy, save money, and save carbon emissions. And so that's where it started.
Yeah.
So that came first, and then because it was kind of successful in weird ways, these cards, I thought I'd just produce them and somebody would sponsor me to produce them in bulk and give them to schools, for example.
Yeah.
But that didn't quite happen. But I showed them to a few of the clients I was working with at the time, and one of those clients was a very big bank, an international bank. And they just loved the idea, but not to give me lots of money so I could give them to schools, but for them to
Yeah.
co-brand them, give them to their employees as a
Yeah.
kind of staff engagement around climate change and sustainability. So that got me started in the area. And then I started hearing and reading about this thing called gamification that had been initially successful in areas like health and fitness
Yeah.
and the financial sector in terms of teaching people kind of financial literacy.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, this seems to work. This, as a simple game, seems to work to get people who would not be otherwise interested in maybe a kind of a PowerPoint lecture on climate change and carbon emissions. But if you give them a game, put a bit of competition in there, it seems to work. So that's what started my interest in gamification. And then, of course, I was asked to write the short book about it in the Do Short series,
Yeah.
and it went from there.
Yes. We ended up as unexpected co-authors because they combined one of my books with one of yours and somebody, a third author as well. To
Okay, the little kind of anthology of Do Shorts.
yes. So basically, I suppose you were discovering that for a lot of people, sustainability is too stodgy. It's a bit po-faced. And, we always get these terrible cliches of, the hands cupping a little sapling on the website, which I hate. I hate that image with an absolute passion. So how far do you think gamification can go, or does it have to be combined with other things, or is it horses for courses in terms of the audiences you're using it with?
Mhm. Well, funnily enough, your request for this podcast led me back to rereading the book. So I hadn't touched it for a long time. It came out in 2013, so it's a
Yeah.
decade more old. And it was fascinating rereading it because at the time I was just throwing out there the ideas that we might be able to use gamification in sustainability. It would be at the time a innovative, new, fun way of trying to engage people.
Hmm.
And I was smiling to myself as I was reading the book just the other day that a lot of the things I was talking about then as oh maybe this would work. Now we kind of take for granted. I see it all over the place. The elements of game. So if I just give you a quick um, definition of there's lots of definitions of
Yeah.
gamification, but at its essence, the idea of gamification, which is an awful term by the way, I've never liked it, but it's the term that everybody uses now.
Mhm.
It's taking the elements of what makes games, real games, social games, um, online games, taking the elements of what makes them fun, it's rather addictive, makes people want to come back, makes people work together for some of the games in a
Mhm.
collaborative space, or makes people a little bit competitive, so it makes them come back more and more. It's taking all of those elements that make games so popular
Mhm.
and applying them to non-game situations, whether it be your health, whether it be fitness. I mean, the big example of where it's done tremendously well is in the idea of the Fitbit, the
Yeah.
wearable gadgets, and so that's all gamified. It's totally
Yes.
gamified. You can be in competitions with your friends and family. You level up to new levels. So that's a perfect example of how it's worked so well.
Yeah.
Um, so now, in back a decade ago, we didn't see that kind of activity in the environmental and the sustainability kind of
Hmm.
area and sector, but now it's everywhere. You
Yes.
obviously it's kind of leaderboards for things and kind of working in teams against each other to top that leaderboard, and then challenges and pledging and leveling up and
Yeah.
putting things together so I think it's just permeated. People won't know that they are using elements of gamification, I think.
Yeah.
It's just they work and people are familiar with them because so many people play simple games, online games, social games, mass mass online games. So it's just another tool. It's not a silver bullet or but it I think it's really helpful to widen participation, to bring people in
Yeah.
and hopefully educate them on something, and even more hopefully get them to change, even if it's just one little thing
Yeah.
about the way then they are on that road. So
Yeah.
it's embedded now, I think.
Yeah, it brings a lot of peer pressure together when because I've seen it work with teams, different departments in say a law firm, all having to see how much energy they can save, and obviously nobody wants to let the side down, because even if it's a nominal prize at the end of the day, uh, I think we are naturally competitive, and we follow team sports for a reason, don't we? The biggest sports in the world are almost all team sports. So it does make people pull that way in. So we talked about the top trump playing cards. How is your are you still doing the top trump playing cards, or have you diversified into other forms of gamification?
Absolutely. We've got so we started with one theme, which was energy based, but now we've got 8 themes. So we try to cover the gamut of environmental sustainability with our. We changed the name from we were Eco Action Trumps until 2016,
Yeah.
and then something happened across the pond, which made me think I cannot have my lovely environmental game with
I didn't
something
think of
else.
that.
So we now call it Eco Action Toppers because we're always looking for top value, which is the top
Yeah.
saving. And so I've tried to over the years expand to cover the whole gamut of environmental sustainability. So we look at obviously energy, but we also look at water, we look at food, we look at waste and recycling, we look at things you can do in the office. We look at families, if you've got a growing family. So I'm hoping now there's something for and there's free and easy actions. So for kids and students to do they're not going to cost you anything. They're more habitual. And then I got the bug to to develop more. To begin with, I was always trying to re-engineer an existing game because you've got to be careful. It's really, really hard to create a new game and make it kind of fun and easy to play. So to begin with, I was looking out for existing games that everybody knows. They've either played in the past or they're playing now with their kids and grandkids. So that there's that familiarity, which is useful because that there's no barrier there to entry.
Yeah.
Then just putting that eco messaging into it somehow. So with a game like Top Trumps, it's all about numbers. So if you like numbers and facts and stats, this is great because you've got loads of numbers to learn and you can impress or bore your friends with carbon saving numbers and that. But then some people don't like that. So we came up with various versions of snakes and ladders, and in particular, giant size snakes and ladders. So at events and kind of outreach and things like that, you'd have this giant snakes and ladder board. And of course, you go with the game mechanic there of sorry, snakes, but snakes are bad. So snakes are the bad habits, and ladders are good. So if you land on a ladder, you read out to everybody what that ladder says, which is you're doing something good, whatever theme might be um, learning about. And then, of course, if you land on a snake, you've got this bad habit that you have to read out to everybody.
Yeah.
And that is immensely pop. That's the simplest and one of the oldest games in the world.
Yes.
But its origins are in it's a game of life. It's to show people that good things happen and bad things happen, and that's just life. And so you can take that idea and make it the kind of an environmental educational tool,
Yeah.
and people love it, especially because they are the counter. So they are
Yeah.
involved in the game. They are the game because they're the counter.
Yeah.
Something. So things like that. And the other one that I've had a lot of success with was kind of pinched in a little bit from Play Your Cards Right. Do you
Yeah.
remember,
Yes.
Lucy? The game and mechanic there is very simple. It's higher or lower.
Yeah.
So what I've done with that is again using things like carbon emission savings or energy savings or water savings or food footprints. And it started out as in real life card game. So you've got actions that save an amount of say carbon,
Mhm.
and there's another action that saves an amount of carbon, and the audience or the competitors have to guess whether the second action has a higher or lower carbon saving than the action that goes before. So it works exactly like the Play Cards Right
Yeah.
quiz show, but it's really great because for teams because you play against each other. So teams play against each other, and they have to come up with an answer, and the conversations it starts within that team when they're trying to work out whether one action is going to save more or less carbon or water or whatever it is. It's really fascinating because it starts that conversation within our team. You,
Yeah.
as the kind of facilitator, the Brucey, doesn't have to do anything because they strike up those conversations. And so what I
Right.
did with that game,
We'll probably have to explain to younger listeners or watchers that Bruce Forsyth was the famous host of Play a Card Time. So just before we go, I wanted to pick up on something before I forget, because it started when you were talking about the snakes and ladders, about the person being the counter and having to make the move, and how that sort of got a bit more of a almost an emotional connection. And then when you're talking about those discussions within the team of whether they're going to go higher or lower. I'm a big believer myself in that the way you engage people in sustainability is by definitely sort of immersing them in it rather than one-way conversation, that the more they're actually involved. I know it sounds a bit tree huggy, oh, it has to be a two-way discussion, all the rest of it, but I mean, really making people think about what they need to, why they need to act, what they need to do, and how they need to do it. So that seemed to be a theme that was coming out of your different examples there, that the best ones seem to be where people were having to, truly immerse themselves in the game and therefore in the world of sustainability. Would that be fair?
yeah, and there's no teaching from a third party involved
Yeah.
because it's all there in the game. And if it's a game where there's two teams against each other, I just stand back when I'm facilitating the kind of the higher lower game in real life. I just stand back and just listen to the kind of the conversation and what happens is a lot of personal experience comes out there when they're arguing whether they think it's higher or lower, and when there's a disagreement within the group with what they're going to go for, their reasoning behind why they think one action will have a higher positive effect than another. And it's just fascinating. It's a really great. It's great because it gets the energy up. And if you're doing a day's worth of sustainability training or something like that,
Yeah.
these kind of games are great because they just get the energy back in the room. You can do a chalk and talk session, but then you say, okay, we're going to see how much you've learned by playing that particular theme
Yeah.
of the game. And so that really cements it in their heads. Well, if they want to cement. So yeah, no, it's a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and it works.
Yeah.
But not for everyone. Some people really don't like playing games.
Well, that's what I was
Uh,
going to ask. Have you ever had a really tough audience who just would not play ball?
not a tough audience because if you've got an audience, then it's going to be a very small minority that's I never played games as a kid. I'm not
Yeah.
playing games. Blah, blah, blah. That's a very small minority, but they are there. I know I have come across people, when we've been doing events where they're kind of walkthroughs and kind of you're
Yeah.
trying to engage people, come, try your luck, try your skills on, and you go, oh gosh, no, it's a game. They're for kids. I don't play
Yeah.
games, but that is a very small number of people. Interestingly,
Yeah. What other challenges have you faced in promoting sustainability in general, but I suppose
yeah,
gamification in particular?
I don't use the term if I can help it.
Yeah.
Uh, I never use that to. If I need to talk to someone who I think will understand what it is, I'll just shorthand is, oh, I'm trying to sort of use gamification to do this. But otherwise, I just talk about these are environmental educational tools disguised as games, a bit like Transformers, robots in disguise. So I I think people, well, it's known now as a term, isn't it? But in the early days, nobody knew what it meant, and it's a bit of a horrible word. So that would have been a challenge until I learned not to talk about gamification because it's
Yeah.
um,
First rule of gamification is not to talk about gamification.
yeah, just talk about games as a really useful tool. I've had a lot of success in councils. When councils tools, they need kind of uh, just different ways to get the whole of society involved in the messaging. So yeah, and you'd never talk about gamification there. It's just an engagement tool, another engagement tool that brings, and it's multi-generational. So that's another positive aspect. If you're working in communities and you're working, families come along.
Hmm.
We've done quite a few kind of outdoor festivals where we have these giant versions of all of our games, even the card games, and then families come along and they play together and they're learning together. Um, and the kids sometimes are embarrassing the parents by saying, "Oh, you don't do that," and the mother's like, "No, I'm always doing my recycling." Um, but other challenges, I guess, in some areas, it's been taken seriously as a educational and behavioral
Hmm.
change device tool. But I don't think so much nowadays. People get it, and so many people play silly games on their phones to
Yeah.
waste hours and hours of the time. There isn't that kind of like, oh, games, but
Hmm.
these just for kids. I get that less and less because people just naturally get the idea nowadays.
Yeah. So obviously having a PhD in climate science, you know the scale of the problem.
Mm.
Um, it's interesting how you jump from that to gamification and being chief fun officer.
It's a heavy burden sometimes because, especially in the early days of doing this, I always had something at the back of my head that thought, oh gosh, I hope people don't think I'm trivializing the issue because it is the biggest existential threat we have. And here's me trying to kind of, inject some fun and laughter and kind of competition into this. And so that always used to worry. It worries me less nowadays, but it's still there because, of course, the threat and the severity of the situation in terms of climatic change is just getting worse and worse. And so here I am, still a fun officer, trying to get people to take action through having a bit of fun with the topic. So there is a bit of a tension, but we have to get people on board and involved and educated. And if it takes a little bit of light-hearted gameplay, then so be it.
If I could go off on a bit of a tangent, I mentioned the introduction that you're or B Corp or Eco Action Games is a B Corp. How have you found that?
So we've been B Corp since 2019. So it was quite early on. At the time, there were less than 200 of us in the UK. Now it's thousands and thousands, isn't it? It's really expanded and quickly. I found the process of becoming a B Corp in the first instance, it was really arduous. I gave up twice because it was just so arduous. But that I think has changed a lot
Yeah.
in the years. And I've been through one renewal. You have to go through it uh, every 3 years. So
Mm.
I went through a renew and I was dreading it, but it was much easier than I imagined it would be. And so when we first got the status, the accreditation, again, nobody knew what it was. You had to
Yeah.
explain, oh, we're a B Corp, but blank stares. But now I think the trajectory of people knowing what a B Corp, well, vaguely what a B Corp is and
Yeah.
what it means is amazing. So that's good. In the early days, it didn't have much of a effect because so few of us had it and people didn't understand what it meant, so
Yeah.
didn't value it. But now it's kind of, it's gone
Yeah.
stratospheric, isn't it, in
Um,
terms. So it's useful. It's a shorthand, isn't it? When I say to people, "Oh, we're a B Corp and we
Yeah.
have been for 5 years," people all of a sudden you get that kind of automatic respect, and people. It's a shorthand for these guys are kind of ethical and they know what they're doing and they're doing things for the right reasons. So it's useful from
Mm.
that
Good,
perspective.
good. I'm just always interested because there are obviously a whole raft of different, accreditations and things that businesses can apply for, and sometimes choosing the right one for them is a bit of
Yeah,
a challenge.
yeah. There's a lot of noise out there, isn't there?
Yeah,
Um, I haven't been tempted with any of the others. I'm glad I went through it because it was very rigorous.
yeah,
It was too rigorous in the early days. So, but at least it means something, and I just hope they don't dilute it,
yeah,
um, because it is the gold. I don't know what you think, but I think it is the gold standard of what's out there in terms of accreditation.
yeah. Excellent.
Um,
So, well, that might be the answer to my next question, which is what was your proudest moment, in this trajectory from, testing the water and on with your top trumps through to what you do today? What's the crowning glory, the one that makes you smile inwardly?
um, Gosh, that's harder to answer than you'd imagine. I I'm proud that I feel vindicated that this was a whim of mine that was worth pursuing and
Yeah,
has kind of entered the sector as as something that people just do now. They don't think about, oh, is this a flash in the pan or is this actually worth its salt? So I'm proud of that and the fact that well, we're still going after 10, 11 years, and
yeah,
sort of the COVID times, it was rocky. So I'm proud we're still here. Um, and yes, and B Corp status was once I finally got it was a proud moment. So yes, I think it's just the vindication of the idea.
yeah. The idea was a good one, and you've proven it in practice. And if you were speaking to somebody, who had an idea of how to engage people better in sustainability, or you could go back in time to talk to your younger self, what advice would you give?
Just plow on. Don't listen to the naysayers. Don't listen to the people that go, oh, they never will. There's a lot of that, isn't there, when
Yeah,
you're trying something new. Just plow on. You can only fail, but with yeah, don't listen to the naysayers. Just be positive, and if you believe in it, other people will too.
excellent. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you, Paula. I just love your enthusiasm and the fact that you had that idea and it was before its time, and you did plow forward with it and made it a success. So, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing all that wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun, as it should be, given this is gamification.
And your chief fun officer, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.